What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and I have been screaming at the top of my lungs this Dynasty rookie draft cycle to go out there and trade your 2022 first for 2023 firsts by any means necessary. And it's one thing to say that, and it's one thing to hype that draft class up, but I think that's something that is really important when we're talking about future draft classes, is to not just accept the hype that like the Devy community and the Dynasty community has created for this draft class, but to kind of peel back the curtains and look for ourselves. And as somebody that has recently gotten into the Devy space, I just completed a Canvas to Can startup with my co-manager at ANellylytics on Twitter. We absolutely destroyed that Canvas to Can startup, but as somebody that's sort of started to look at the Devy space and join a Devy league, I have branched out. And as you guys know, my prospect model, the RS grading system, has now branched into the 2023 and 2024 draft classes. So today, we're going to go over what my model kind of saw with the 2023 draft classes. And for any of you sickos out there that want to see any of the Devy content I have to provide, I'm not going to be able to tell you, you should be drafting this guy, or this is your, Devy strategy kind of content. But if you want to see how these players look in the RS grading system this far out, it's an interesting thing to look at when you're trading those future draft picks. So with that being said, as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you go down below, subscribe, and leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
So the way we're going to do this in breaking down the 2023 draft class is to break down every single one of these positions and then kind of talk about how the class as a whole stacks up against previous draft classes. And at quarterback in the 2023 draft class, you have two pretty clear guys up top in Bryce Young out of Alabama and CJ Stroud out of Ohio State. And these guys are both essentially top 3 consensus draft picks right now, where in like the NFL draft, they're expected to go top 3. At this point in time, it's really not even controversial to say they're both better prospects by miles compared to the 2022 quarterback draft class. They both blow Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, Matt Corral out of the water as prospects. And these guys easily would be at the top of the 2022 draft class as the QB 1 and 2 and fighting with Breece Hall up top for the 101. They both absolutely balled out as sophomores. And one of the biggest inputs in my model is QBR, which is adjusted total back quarterback rating, which values the quarterback on all play types on a 0 to 100 scale, adjusted for the strength of opposing defenses faced. Now, CJ Stroud really pops in this. He has the highest quarterback rating ever for a 19-year-old in my entire database. He was 19 to begin the season, so he counts as a 19-year-old. He is ahead of Johnny Manziel's Heisman season. He's ahead of Deshaun Watson's age 19 season, Jameis Winston's age 19 season, Marcus Mariota's age 19 season. He is up there for having one of the greatest age 19 seasons ever. Now, did he have Chris Olave, JSN, Garrett Wilson, Jeremy Rucker? He had a bunch of weapons, but he still played really well. That's still a very strong stat, and it is still a quarterback-centric type stat. Then you have Bryce Young, who had an 87.6, not quite as elite. He also wasn't 19. He was 20, I believe. But both guys were still in that elite range of QBR. So they both have elite ranges of QBR, like a A- to A+ type grade in that area. And they both played at big schools, right? We had Bryce Young at Alabama, CJ Stroud at Ohio State, and they're projected to be top 3 picks in the NFL draft, and that's really solid. The only real issue for them is more from a fantasy football perspective than it is a real life perspective. I think that they are really, really clean, real life perspective type quarterback prospects. The only issue, they aren't rushing quarterbacks. They're not very mobile. Both of them had a 0% or worse market share of rushing yards in their offenses. It drops them from guys who are mobile and can run the ball a little bit to a archetype within my quarterback database that is listed as statue. They both qualify as statues, who are guys that just do not run the ball at all. The guys who kind of profile like that are the Jared Goffs of the world, the Josh Rosens of the world. And now I know that Bryce Young is athletic, like he can run a little bit, but the issue is for fantasy, we don't care about athleticism in terms of quarterback rushing nearly as much as we care about tendencies. And when you have a quarterback that's not rushing the ball or taking carries in college, it's hard to imagine a scenario where they come into the NFL and they all of a sudden start to scramble against bigger, faster, stronger competition. So as of now, both quarterbacks are elite quarterback prospects, which is a really, really good bucket to be in. That is a 75% hit rate of top 12 seasons at the quarterback position. The only issue is that they are statues. So they're elite statues, which puts them in a bucket of guys like Stafford, Jared Goff, Sam Bradford, and Tua. So it's not great. Guys that are elite mobile Konami code type guys are Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray. It's a much more ceiling-oriented bucket, whereas when you are a statue, it's tough to see a world where you can just be a dominant force, right? You have to be, in terms of fantasy, if you're not providing anything in the rushing game, you have to be so efficient that you need to be Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady type efficient in terms of passing the football to just have repeated top 5 seasons at the quarterback position. Now, I will say this is a bucket of only 4 other elite statue quarterbacks, so that is a small sample. Maybe there is something in between a quarterback like a Stafford, a Goff, and like a Peyton Manning, which I think Stafford's like a decent area, but Stafford being your like ceiling / like median type outcome isn't the same trajectory or the same like home run swing as a guy that has a Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen type ceiling. So again, really good quarterback prospects, would easily be in contention for 101 in the 2022 draft class, but there's some to be desired in terms of those quarterbacks with them not being like super prolific in terms of rushing. Now they have another year. Both guys are like semi-athletic. Maybe they go out there and they post a rushing yard market share that would boost them up to mobile, but we'll see. Now, we have 2 other guys that kind of stick out in that next quarterback tier of Will Levis out of Kentucky and Tyler Van Dyke out of Miami. And Will Levis is getting a lot of hype right now. He is going in these like way too early mock drafts. A lot of them are kind of garbage. He went first overall in the CBS one. He looks like a consensus top 5 pick this far out. Now, these are really far out projections, so they don't hold a ton of weight, but he pretty much has everything set up in front of him that if he just goes out there and performs, that he will be a top 10 pick. When you look at Will Levis's like positives on his profile, their projected draft capital, again, like top 5 to 10 type pick, and he qualified as a mobile quarterback with about 14% of Kentucky's rushing yards last season. The downside is that he hasn't flashed much in the throwing metrics I look at. QBR, he didn't blow me away. And in my model, the most important quarterback stat is big time throws, which are just like throws down the field in tight windows, like big touchdown throws, to turnover worthy play ratio, which is just like interceptable passes, like almost fumbles, that kind of thing. And he only had 14 to 10 last season, which is not good at all. That's like a C+ type grade. It's only like a 1.4 ratio. That's not good at all. You want something that's like 2.5 and above. He has a lot of room to grow in that area. Now, it's not really too hard to see him come out there next year and play really well. Maybe even have like a Zach Wilson type ascension where he goes out there, balls out of control, has just an amazing season. That is in his range of outcomes. He just needs to take that next step in his throwing metrics. Now, on the other side of that coin, we have Tyler Van Dyke out of Miami, who is sort of a mini tier behind Will Levis in projected draft capital, but projected draft capital is so fragile this far out that I would say he's in the same tier. But he's someone that's more of instead of a top 5 to 10 guy, he's like a top 10 to 15 guy as of right now. He's out of Miami. And the issue with him versus Will Levis is that he doesn't have the rushing upside, where Will Levis is at least mobile and he's going to get you some stuff on the ground. Tyler Van Dyke is a statue quarterback, but he has draft capital going for him with like top 10 to 15 type draft capital. And he had 25 big time throws to 12 turnover worthy plays, where instead of being like a C or C+ type grade, that gives him like a B- So he's much more of a refined thrower this far in, but again, the rushing upside does hurt him for fantasy. But I think that both guys have every opportunity here to make that Zach Wilson, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield type final season leap to kind of get up there with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Some other fun names I'll throw out there are Anthony Richardson out of Florida, who I love. I drafted him in my Campus to Canton League. You have Grayson McCall out of Coastal Carolina, Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee, and all of these guys are projected to go day 2. Again, draft capital is really fragile. They could go first round. There's plenty of room to grow there. Again, when I say anything about draft capital, it's really with a grain of salt this far out, but they all have Konami code designations. They all have 15% rushing yard market shares or better on their teams. And if any of them outperform expectations this season and creep into the first round, even into like the top 10, these are the guys that are going to be really real difference makers in fantasy. And my bet personally is on Anthony Richardson. I'm a really big fan of his game. Now, he doesn't have a rushing yard market share in this graphic because he didn't qualify. He didn't have enough pass attempts last year, but he is electric on the ground. Now, again, we're kind of hoping that he puts it together in terms of throwing the ball and looking like a competent quarterback prospect, but he goes to an SEC school. He's a Konami code guy. He was second in the NCAA among quarterbacks in breakaway run percentage, which is insane that he had 54.5% of all of his rushes go for more than 15 yards. So more than half of his rushes went for 15 yards or more. He was 5th in elusive rating among quarterbacks, 2nd in yards per carry, just super dynamic playmaker type guy. Again, we just hope that he puts it together through the air. Now, moving on to running backs, we have the prince who was promised, Bijan Robinson, running back out of Texas. He runs out Keontae Ingram just as a true freshman. He runs out a junior Keontae Ingram at Texas. He has been just an absolute god at Texas. He has been one of the best prospects we've seen since like a Saquon Barkley. He is in that tier for me. I only have, to this point, 3 legendary running back prospects ever. There have only ever been 3 since 2007 in the RS grade database, and it is Ezekiel Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley. The fact that Bijan Robinson is even in that conversation through only 2 years is just wild. It's wild company. He looks the part as well. He's 6'2", 220 pounds. He's done nothing but produce through 2 years. And just to be clear, at running back, we have legendary tier, which is the best prospect tier possible, which at running back have a 100% top 12 season hit rate. Then elite, which has an 80% top 12 season hit rate. Gold has a 50% top 12 season hit rate. Silver at 25%, and bronze at 7%. And the hit rates across positions vary, but that ordering of the tiers stays the same across all the positions. Now, the question is, outside of, buzz and hype, why is he considered in that same category of prospect? And the first metric I want to point out with running backs here is adjusted yards per team play, which is rushing yards plus receiving yards times 2 divided by team play. So it's pretty much just measuring production and efficiency with a lean towards receiving production. And across his first 2 years, he matches up with the legendary running backs really well. I'm going to put on the screen a chart with him next to Saquon, Christian McCaffrey, and Ezekiel Elliott. And through 2 years, he is right in the mix with these guys in this stat. He is right in the mix with Saquon for having the highest adjusted yards per team play in year 1. And he's in that cluster in year 2 next to Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott. Now, Christian McCaffrey's year 2 was just on another level, but through 2 years, he looks the part. Now, the other question is that in fantasy, or just like in the modern NFL in general, we need a running back that can catch passes. And when we look at this stat through 2 years, he is right there neck and neck with Saquon Barkley through 2 years. And then you see he's kind of a tier above Ezekiel Elliott in terms of catching the football. And then you have Christian McCaffrey, who again blows everyone out in that sophomore year. He is just a different breed when it comes to catching the football. But again, Bijan Robinson produced, he was productive, and he catches the football. I think the biggest problem for Bijan Robinson is going to be draft capital, and I think it's kind of out of his control. He is genuinely, through 2 years, he is a similar talent to a Saquon, a McCaffrey, and Ezekiel Elliott, who all went top 10 in their draft classes. And that's no coincidence, because every legendary running back, a prerequisite to be a legendary tier running back is to be a top 10 draft pick. The only issue is that we haven't seen a running back go, I don't think we've even seen a running back go top 15 since Saquon Barkley in 2018. We're now in 2022. It'll be 5 years since then. Front offices are getting smarter. They don't want to pay running backs. They don't want to take them early. It gets a little bit tough. Right now, I have Bijan Robinson projected for 10th overall. I see him go there in mocks sometimes, but I see him going in like the 20s and other mocks. Again, it's just going to come down to where a team is comfortable picking him. If he goes out there next year, he really needs to smash in year 3 so that a team does pick him in top 10. If not, it's on the end of the world to still be a very high-end elite type prospect in the same breath as a Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, Joe Mixon, as just a really, really strong prospect. And my next favorite running back in this class, or my next ranked running back in this class, is Jamir Gibbs, who played 2 years at Georgia Tech, and he's transferring to Alabama, which is huge because productive Alabama running backs with pass-catching skill sets, they go in the first round. We saw Josh Jacobs, we saw Najee Harris, and that's where I have Jamir Gibbs going right now. I have him projected for 15th overall in the first round. I actually use most of my projected draft capital is just from mock drafts that I've seen out there, and I kind of just mess around with them. This far out, draft capital is super fragile, but I try and do the best with what I got. Now, Jamir Gibbs is really interesting because he is no hyperbole at all. He is a Christian McCaffrey type receiving weapon already. As of right now, if we look at just running backs drafted in the first round, he is the highest average market share of receiving yards through 2 years of any round 1 running back ever. He has averaged 17.4% of his team's receiving yards on average. The only first-round running backs to even have an 11% or better are Saquon Barkley, Chris Johnson, CJ Spiller, and Christian McCaffrey. 3 out of 4 of those guys are literally fantasy cheat codes. And then this is what happens when you throw Jamir Gibbs into that same graphic from before in terms of receiving yard market share. He goes toe-to-toe against legendary running backs, and he goes toe-to-toe with Christian McCaffrey even in year 2. He is that far ahead in year 2, up there with McCaffrey, and he actually blows McCaffrey out of the water in year 1. He is, from a fantasy football perspective where we want these just like crazy pass-catching running backs, Gibbs has an insane amount of upside. Now, he's not the same guy as Bijan where he's like 6 foot, 220. He's more of a LaShawn McCoy, Chris Johnson, Christian McCaffrey type build at 5'11", 200 pounds, which is interesting because it does seem like the NFL is kind of shifting towards that with James Cook going in like the second round is like 197 pounds. There is an upside case out there where Jamir Gibbs could get drafted higher than Bijan Robinson just because he has that like crazy sort of like modern receiving back type build. It really depends what he does at Alabama and what Bijan Robinson does this year. Both of them have upside cases to go as high as top 10, especially with Bijan Robinson. Should be like an improved offense with Quinn Ewers, and you have Xavier Worthy in year 2. And I think that they're also trying to bring in Jordan Adderson, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. But both of them are very interesting as pretty firm round 1 guys at this point. I would say Bijan more likely than Jamir Gibbs, but both guys, in my eyes, for sure Bijan's better than Breece Hall. Jamir Gibbs, it's tough to say, but I would probably put him ahead of Breece Hall as well. Just with that receiving skill set, assuming he goes first round. Now, the wild part about this class is I would say running back is for sure its strong suit, is when you look past those top 2 guys, because those top 2 guys are the bread and butter of this draft class, and you have 4 guys in the mix that are all probably better prospects than Kenneth Walker this far out. And you have guys like Tank Bigsby out of Auburn, Sean Tucker at Syracuse, Zach Evans at Ole Miss, and Devin A-Chain out of Texas A&M. And all 3 guys aren't as clear smashes, first-round draft capital type guys as Bijan Robinson and Jamir Gibbs, but they are on a minimum gold to elite type trajectory at this point. On this graphic in adjusted yards per team play, they all hover around that dotted line, which is the average for top 12 running backs. It's really just going to come down to, can these guys finish really strong in year 3? Can they test well? And can they get the draft capital? But at this point, we have 6 running backs in the mix to be gold, elite, legendary type running backs. And compared to this 2022 draft class we have right now, we only had 2 gold or better running backs. So that's 3 times as many, plus a guy like Bijan and Gibbs at the top, which compared to that 2020 draft class where we had Jonathan Taylor and we had DeAndre Swift at the top. And the crazy part is that this time we have prospects that look as good as those guys, but could get first-round draft capital, even top 10 draft capital. So the running backs are really, really exciting. Then we have wide receiver, and this class is super strong at wide receiver as well. Not as strong as running back, but one of the stronger wide receiver classes in recent years. We have 3 prospects that will be in the mix for legendary tier based on combine, draft capital, all of that good stuff. But these guys are on that path and are at this point pretty much at worst elites, as long as they don't get like hurt or have like a crazy disappointing year. And I charted them all by receiving yards per team pass attempt, which is my favorite wide receiver metric I have in my model, which is just receiving yards divided by team pass attempts. It's really simple, and it pretty much just shows dominance, right? So like a receiving yard market share perspective, but then also when you divide it by pass attempts, it also puts a weight on efficiency as well. So are you dominating your passing offense, and are you being efficient? And the first guy we're going to talk about is Jackson Smith-Njigba, or JSN. And he went to Ohio State, and he had an insane year 2. You see it here, and he has the highest receiving yards per team pass attempt in year 2 among all 3 of these wide receivers, despite competing with 2 top 12 draft picks in Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, which is just insane. It's actually eerily similar. This season it's eerily similar to Jamar Chase's year 2. He actually beats out Jamar Chase in year 2 receiving yards per team pass attempt, even though Jamar Chase had like Terrace Marshall and Justin Jefferson, where JSN had Garrett Wilson and Olave. So he is on that path. It's just too early to say that he is a legendary prospect at this point, unlike with the Bijan Robinson, because with wide receivers, it's dependent on combine numbers, film grades from Lance Zierlein, a 3rd year of steady production. So there's going to be some numbers out there in flux, but JSN has easily the best chance to be that. And I think that I would put it now at like maybe like a 25 to 35% chance that he can get there, which is really exciting. Then we have Kayshon Boutte, who had a great year 1 at LSU, was supposed to be that next Jamar Chase, LSU type wide receiver, Justin Jefferson. The only issue is that his second year got derailed by an ankle injury, which really sucks to see. It looks bad on this chart because this chart takes into account the entire season, so it's not per game. But on a per game basis, he was still dominant. He had 6 games, 38 catches, 509 yards, and 9 touchdowns, again, in 6 games. So he averaged over that span 6 catches per game, 85 yards per game, and 1.5 touchdowns per game in the SEC on a bad LSU team last year. So he still got it, just a matter of getting healthy and having a strong 3rd year. Scouts still love him. He's still going like early first in a lot of mock drafts. He has a lot of buzz, again, just needs a strong 3rd year. Then the 3rd wide receiver on this list is Jordan Adderson, who I don't even know where he plays at this point. He plays at Pittsburgh, but he's been teasing an NIL transfer deal to Texas or USC. He's got a lot of things up in the air, so I don't know where he's playing next year. But regardless, between the 3 wide receivers, he actually has the cleanest profile. He produced both years. His year 2 goes toe-to-toe with JSN's. Even though he played in the ACC and didn't really have any competition on his team, and he kind of benefited from like a Kenny Pickett spike year out of nowhere, he has a really clean profile. He's a little bit undersized at like 6 foot, like 175, 180, but hopefully he beefs up, or like those numbers are wrong. Still not the end of the world. A lot of these wide receivers coming in these days are all undersized. It's not really a huge must for me at this point, but he just needs to crush another year. He's easily going to be elite, but I've heard that he's like kind of like Odell Beckham-esque in terms of athleticism, and that's not really reflected here. I don't have those numbers, but if he does perform well, or he smashes at like a USC and he goes top 10, he's also in the mix to maybe be a legendary type wide receiver. Now, the other legendary wide receivers the past few years have been Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham, Des Bryant, Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson. That echelon of wide receiver. You generally have in this class 3 guys who have a chance at being that level of prospect. And the other 2 names I'll throw out there are Josh Downs out of UNC and Quentin Johnston out of TCU. Now, Downs had a similar path to JSN, where he had a down freshman year and then a massive year 2. The only issue is that now that Sam Howell is gone, that year 2, he kind of got stuck behind Diami Brown and Daz Newsome, broke out in year 2. Sam Howell's gone now, so we'll kind of see. They have Drake May at quarterback. I don't know if he's going to start, but an interesting nugget is that they have this kid named Drake May, and I heard that name. I was like, that's really similar to, what's the kid who played on UNC? I think it was Marcus May or something. It was something May, or like Mark May, something in that range, but he is brothers with that guy, who I believe won an NCAA championship for the UNC basketball team. Just a weird nugget that I have in the back of my brain, but hopefully Downs has one more year of solid production, and he can also, I mean, if he sticks into the first round, he's in play for elite and is probably gold at worst at this point. Then we have Quentin Johnston out of TCU, who looks like Kayshon Boutte, where he had a really solid first year and a disappointing second year. I don't really know the story with him, what happened at TCU, but both prospects, again, look good. Quentin Johnston needs to have a really strong third year, but both guys look like they'll be golds at worst with the upside to be elite, instead of being like elite at worst with the upside to be legendary like the other 3. And the last position here is tight end. And I don't have a tight end model yet. I plan on putting that together next offseason. But the one guy who sticks out at this far out is Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame. And he's projected to go like top 10 at this point, late first at worst. This is what I believe Dane Brugler at The Athletic had to say about him. He picked him 10th overall in his mock draft. And he said Notre Dame's tight end to NFL pipeline has been unmatched over the past 20 years, and Mayer will continue that streak. He has the size, athleticism, and strong pass-catching skills to be a quarterback's best friend. He's 6'5", 250, looks like a prototypical tight end. He's been a mega producer. The only issue is like how athletic he's going to be. We don't know how he's going to test. I've tried to find combine numbers on him, but all of those high school testing numbers are all kind of nonsense, right? You had some like fat coach like doing a stopwatch at like his high school. It's not going to be the best reading. So he's really just a black box in terms of his athleticism, but this is him in receiving yards per team pass attempt among tight ends that have gone top 10 in the last like 5 to 10 years. So you have Eric Ebron, Kyle Pitts, and TJ Hawkinson, and he blows all of them out of the water through his first 2 years. He is a really, really strong tight end prospect. Just comes down to his testing, but at worst, he is going to be a first round rookie draft type talent next year. So after going through each and every single one of those positions, the question becomes, how does this class stack up to the previous 16 draft classes? So 17 draft classes total. And the way that I found out how this stacks up to previous draft classes is I totaled the number of gold or better quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and total gold or better prospects from each of those draft classes. So how many of those prospects were gold or better in each draft class, and then how many of those prospects were elite or better in each draft class. And this class looks really good. It's tied for first with the most gold plus quarterback prospects, third in gold plus running backs, and tied for fourth in gold or better wide receivers. And that might not seem crazy, but again, this is out of 17 possible years. So this class is top 5 across every position, and it's really strong considering that we still have a year. So we still have like a Zach Wilson type ascension or a Joe Burrow type ascension ahead of us, and we still have a Devonta Smith Heisman senior type season ahead of us. There's a lot still left on the bone with this draft class, and it already grades out really, really well. And not only does it grade really well, it also is really deep. It is tied for the most gold or better prospects with 17 total since 2007. The other draft classes that are tied for first in that category is 2020. So that's when you had Joe Burrow, Herbert, Jonathan Taylor, Swift, Dobbins, Akers, CeeDee Lamb, Judy, all of those guys, that just insane, Justin Jefferson, that insane draft class. And then 2008, which is like really far back, but that draft class was crazy. I think it had 6 first-round running backs taken. So you had Darren McFadden, Chris Johnson, Ray Rice, Matt Forte, Jamal Charles, Jordy Nelson, I believe Matt Ryan, and Joe Flacco as well in that draft class. So 2 really, really solid draft classes. And again, we still have another year to get more. Like this draft or this class could literally break the record for most gold or better prospects in a draft class. I would say yes. At this point in time, I would take, it would be close. I think that I would even debate trading the 102 away for a 2023 first, but at the very core of it, the 103 or later, I would trade for a 2023 first in a heartbeat. Now, for all of you sickos out there that want access to the Devy RS grades, so I have RS grades now for the 2023 and the 2024 draft classes. Those will be on Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. I think it is really, really good to get a feel for those future draft classes. So when you're trading for those future draft classes, instead of, relying on the expertise of just like the market, I think it's really good to have the RS grades where you can already see what those prospects look like from are they elite prospects? Are they legendary prospects this far out? It's really valuable information to have. So if you're, a sicko and want that kind of info, that is going to be in the gold tier or better on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart. Now, with that being said, that is going to do it for us today, fellas. As always, I appreciate you guys sticking around, hearing what I have to say about the pigskin. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice. 10-0, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Me.